When did the cracks in your hunting mindset start appearing?
Whenever I'd see a vegan post and I'd think it was incredibly stupid, like blue hair, emotional vegan, that I'd comment on it and just troll like bacon. But then one day,
The first time you killed an animal, could you talk us through how that was for you then? What about with your family, hunting-centric family? How did your family and your friends and loved ones react, and how did you navigate all of that? Critics of veganism, they often point to crop deaths. If farming plants kills animals too, how do you deal with what they say is an ethical flaw of your thinking? Welcome back to the channel. I'm here today with a very special guest. I'm here with Hunter, and believe it or not, Hunter was a hunter, an actual deer hunter who has now completely changed his outlook on life. And that's what we're going to get into today. So welcome, Hunter, to the channel. Great to have you here.
how's it going, David? Glad to be here, man.
I just want to dive right in here. This is really interesting to me. You grew up in a family and a culture that deeply valued hunting, right? And even to the point that that's what your name is. Your name is Hunter because of that. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, my dad literally named me Hunter. Yeah, it was a huge part of my life. Absolutely. It was one of my first tattoos too, was a deer antler tattoo. It's like our family crest. Like we have a modern family crest that my uncle drew, and it's like has deer antlers on it.
Wow, that's what you've got. You got.
Yeah, I can show it real quick. I guess that's
okay.
Yeah, that was like my first or second ever tattoo I got when I was like 17.
Take us back to those days, those early days. What did hunting mean to you back then? And tell us a bit about how it was tied to your identity, and talk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So back then, hunting was like kind of my identity. You know, when you're a younger kid, like in high school and shit, like everyone has their identity. Mine was like hunting. Every year, something I really looked forward to. One of my favorite things to do was to go up to deer camp with my family. And for those who don't know what deer camp is, it's essentially a day or two before opening day, which in Michigan is November 15th. You go up and we have a cabin up north, and we just go up there and hunt for a week or two straight. And that's all we do is just drink beer, play cards, and hunt. That's all we did. That was one of my favorite things to do. It was a huge aspect of like bonding with my family, bonding with my dad, bonding with my uncles. I loved being outside. It was a big part of my life.
I've actually heard you describe hunting as a sort of rite of passage. As you would kind of in your community, it's something that's kind of deeply connected, not only in that way of what you just said there of something you loved and really part of who you are as a person, but it's also deeply connected to the masculinity and kind of becoming a man as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you like in my like family, like if you don't hunt or like you're against like harming animals, like it's seen as weak. And like one of the last things you want to be like where I'm from is like be seen as weak. I remember even like just growing up in high school and stuff, like kids would like go out of their way to like run over squirrels and rabbits with their truck because I just thought that was cool. And like I always thought it was fucked. Even as a hunter, I always thought that was fucked up, but I never said anything because I didn't want to be seen as weak. I remember one time, like before I ever shot my first deer, it was like a week beforehand. And I remember my grandma said something about like, oh, Hunter, he's too nice. Like he can't shoot a deer. And my dad got all upset. He's like, my son's a man. Like he ain't weak. Like he can go out and shoot this deer and all this stuff. So it's seen as weak to essentially care about animals and not want to harm them.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think these traditions that you grew up with, how do you think they became so powerful? And how did they shape your perspective as well growing up, like on how you see the world?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's shoved down our throat because when you think about it, it really doesn't make sense that it's seen as weak because every other aspect of humanity, like we see sticking up for the defenseless, fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. We see these things as like strong and powerful and like this is what men do. They like stick up for those who can't fight for themselves. But then all of a sudden when it comes to animals, it's the exact opposite. So it doesn't really make sense. I think it probably just comes down to what we're taught in our culture and passed down from family, from the hunter-gatherer days when we had to provide for our families. I'm sure it's just been passed down and here we are today.
And for you growing up, you were fully bought into that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. As you know, I literally, my first year of college, I wrote a paper defending the ethics of hunting. So I was pretty bought into it.
Yeah, I was going to get into that actually. It's a super interesting thing. So that essay that you wrote you were defending hunting as ethical, and you were defending it as necessary for conservation as well. Now, at that time, tell us, like, what did you see as the strongest argument for hunting? And yeah, we'll start there. Like, what was the strongest argument in your essay?
Oh man, I had a few. One which is silly, but at the time it can sound nice to people who don't like really think deeply about it at first. Most deer in the wild, they end up having like brutal deaths, like they die of disease, starvation, whatever else. So you just shoot a deer and it just dies quick and painlessly. So you're preventing it from having a horrible death. That's one. I think I wrote something in there about preventing car accidents. Like the more deer you shoot, the less deer there are, so the less car accidents there are.
How do you reconcile that with where you're at now then? I mean, looking back on those arguments.
Yeah, so when you think of it in the context of like somebody like me, how I was as a hunter who didn't really care much about animals, I didn't grant them much moral worth, you can kind of see where it would make sense. But if you don't like objectify animals to the point where you don't see them as victims, and you think about it in other contexts about like things that we do care about, it starts to not make sense. So for instance, for like the car crashes, like the more deer we shoot, the less car crashes there are. Well, that would apply to people too, right? I could go out and murk half the population, and I would probably cut car accidents down by half, but that wouldn't justify going around murking people because you're making less car accidents, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, but I don't even actually think it is clear that hunting causes less car accidents, because guess what? When deer hear loud gunshots, what do? They run away frantically. When a deer is running frantically, what are they more likely to do? They're more likely to run in the road and get hit by a car. This is why statistics show around November 15th in Michigan, which is opening day in Michigan, there's more car accidents than any other time of the year. Right. So I don't even think that's clearly true. And then the other one about like shooting deer and killing them painlessly before they can die a brutal death because they might starve to death later. If we put that in another context, like we couldn't go to a country with with like a high starvation rate, such as like Yemen, and just go around like murking people because they might die a brutal starvation death later. We couldn't go to like a hospital where people are dying of cancer and just like start killing them because like they might die a brutal, painful death later because they have the preference to live, and you're violating that preference. And the same is in the case with the deer.
And that's something that you came to the conclusion of, despite your upbringing, with that being completely, normalized and celebrated.
Yeah, eventually I came to that conclusion. Yeah, I mean, obviously it took a minute, but
right. Yeah, that's understandable considering how you were raised, and that's the case for a lot of people out there, not hunters only, but with what they eat and what they choose and how they choose to live. It's basically everyone's just winging it, right? And your parents were winging it, your grandparents were winging it. It's hard to blame them, but no one really knows.
I still love my family. Like, I talk about how like my dad like got me into hunting and stuff. I don't blame him. That's how he was raised too. I love my dad. We have a very great relationship. I respect him. I totally get it. Yeah, we are all kind of raised in this world where we're taught certain things, and you can't really blame anyone for it.
Well, everyone's just trying to do their best with the information they've got, right? So something that's really common that comes from a lot of hunters when discussing hunting, and they all most of them kind of fall back on this argument. They say that taking an animal's life in the wild, for a deer, for example, is more humane than factory farming, and they'll use this as a kind of it's their reason for hunting. So I eat meat and that's better, right? Do you find that to be a valid defense? Would you have found that to be a valid defense? And then, as you probably don't now, what do you make of it?
Yeah, so I can tell you for a fact, I know I would have found that as a valid defense because I used that as a defense in my paper defending the ethics of hunting. I literally multiple times in my paper brought up like how it's better than supporting factory farm where animals never see the lights of day, blah, 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 all this stuff. And there is truth to that. I do believe that. Like if there was only two options, hunting or factory farming, yeah, I would say hunting is more ethical because at least before you kill the animal, you're not putting them through a life of torture and misery. So I do think that's true. The problem becomes when we realize we have another option, and the other option is we can be perfectly healthy eating plants, so we don't have to support factory farming or hunting, and that's when the issue comes at play.
I think most reasonable people would agree that if pushed to the point of survival, that hunting would most likely be the better option versus a factory farm system.
And I know most people do think that, because a lot of my friends that I have that are hunters, they've told me, they're like, dude, you've totally changed my mind. Like, I try not to, they do, but they support it less, at least supporting factory farming less. They try to just, eat their kills, their hunts more. So they do buy into that. They do believe that. And I've at least changed my hunting friends' minds on that.
But you are right, though, to reiterate that there is this third option of doing neither, which is obviously if animal welfare and is your concern, right? Which a lot of people are concerned about animal welfare, not necessarily animal rights or anything, but welfare. The highest welfare animal system you can support is the plant-based system, because that doesn't involve animals full stop. So that's the best way to get the highest welfare for animals, is to not fund any system or go out and kill them. Just leave them alone, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I've seen previously you've shared the story of your first kill, the first time you killed an animal, and that you had conflict in that moment, which is I'm very interested in hearing more about that. So could you talk us through that how that was for you then, the first time you went out hunting and that conflict?
Yeah. So, you get out there and you're just excited to be outside with your dad. Like, as a young kid, I loved my dad. I still love him, obviously, and I still look up to him. But especially as a young kid, you really look up to your dad, So I'm excited. Then we're sitting for a few hours. And then we finally see a herd of deer coming across. And that's when I kind of realized, like, oh shit, like, I'm gonna have to shoot this deer. You know what I mean? My dad gets all excited. He's like, hey buddy, there you go. Buck right there. And he's telling me what to do. And that's when it kind of started to set with me, like, oh man, like, I mean, I was young, but I knew what was going on. Like, I'm about to kill this deer that, like, isn't too far off from a dog. Like, I really didn't want to do it, if I'm being honest. Like, I knew it was about to happen. I felt bad, but I had a conflicting interest, because I also didn't want to let my dad down. I wanted to make my dad proud. I didn't want him to be disappointed in me. I didn't want him to think I was weak. So I shot the deer so that way he would be proud of me and he wouldn't think I was weak. And once I shot the deer, it didn't kill it, because as much as hunters tell you that, like, it's a quick, painless death, usually it's not. The deer was flopping around like a fish on the ground. He'd get up, try to follow his family, get back down, flop, run, repeating the process. So we tracked him down, and he was laying there, like, flopping, like, fighting for his life, like, looking at me. And that was even more brutal than the first shot, is putting him out of, like, his misery. Like, I froze. Like, I sat there and I didn't know what to do as, like, a young kid. And my dad's like, you got to put him out of his misery. So I did. I just remember feeling just so terrible. Like, I felt like a deep sense of guilt. After that, I got cold to it. But I remember the first time I did feel pretty bad.
How old were you?
Probably 11 or 12, around there.
Wow. That's a horrible story. That is harrowing. Honestly, people talk about high welfare and they talk about these quick kills in hunting or high welfare in a slaughterhouse, and it can never be high enough and it can never be quick enough, especially when there is the third option that we've already established, especially considering that it can never be good enough.
There's this kind of false belief that goes around where, like, hunting, like, it always causes this quick, painless death. Like, every time you shoot a deer and it just dies within 5 seconds. I'm telling you, David, that is the furthest thing from the truth. That so rarely happens. It's just what you hear about from hunters, because, hunters want to feel good. They don't want to feel guilty. They want to have you hear the best side of hunting. But I'll tell you what, this year alone, on my jiu-jitsu class, I train jiu-jitsu kind of like in the middle of nowhere. That's where I'm from, And I couldn't tell you how many times kids have missed class or my coach has been late because, like, they were spending hours tracking down deer, following blood that they never found. And it just makes sense when you think about it logically. You're shooting deer from, 60 to 120 yards out, sometimes 200-300 yards out. You're not going to shoot it perfectly every time. It's just not going to happen.
I never thought about that until just now, that the level of skill is probably not that high across the board, and people are going to be missing and
Oh, and
misfiring.
even if
And
the skill is high, like my
right.
dad, he's a really good shot. He was in the army. He sights his gun in every year.
Mm,
Practices all the time. He still has bad shots. More
right.
probably almost more than not, because not only are you shooting from 100 yards out, you're also, there's bushes in the way, there's trees, it's a moving target, all sorts of things. So of course, a hunter, for every 10 bad shots he has one good shot, and he'll tell you about that one, and that's all you hear.
Now, at the time that this happened, then with this, where you followed this deer that was struggling and you had to kill the deer, you clearly had a strong reaction, and you've discussed it now here, and you can still see the emotions there actually, even all this time later. So it's clearly a strong reaction and something that hurt you to see and do. Clearly, also you suppressed that and it completely suppressed those feelings. You've already mentioned that you felt that you wanted to please your dad, and in the moment, that's why. But then what do you think pushes young people like you were at that point to continue suppressing those feelings and to go out there and do it again?
Yeah, so it's essentially what I've already said. It's, you want to make your dad proud, and
Right.
also a big thing, and again, we already said this, but you don't want to look weak. As a young man, I mean, what do all young boys want to be? They want to be the roughest, toughest outlaw around, you know what I mean? Like, they don't
Right.
want to be seen as weak, they don't want to be seen as girly. This is like the worst thing to be looked at as a young boy, and you want to prove everyone wrong. So if you're raised in a culture where shooting animals is seen as tough and manly, and caring for animals is seen as weak and feminine, of course you're going to continue to shoot animals to prove to everyone how tough and manly you are.
I've got a question. I'm going to lighten the mood a little from where we were. Actually, I've got a question from Reddit that I think was being asked in a jokey way, but it does have a real question in there. It was by someone called Miss Little Cute on Reddit, who asks, "Do you still dress in camouflage and eat your salad while sitting in a tree?"
No, I don't do that. What I do, I still go to deer camp as a vegan. I just don't
Okay.
hunt. I go up, play cards for a night, and come back home. I don't have anything against wearing camo. Like, some vegans might have something against wearing camo or whatever. I
I
don't
don't think
care. Like,
so.
I'll wear camo as long as you're not shooting animals. Like, I don't care.
Well, the real question in here, I think, is I suppose, what would you say to people who think veganism strips away that rugged outdoors? I suppose the lifestyle. They say, well, going vegan takes you away from that life. I mean, you just kind of disproved it by saying you go to deer camp. But yeah, what else would you say to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because you don't hunt deer anymore doesn't mean you can't go out in nature. Doesn't mean you can't go mushroom hunting. I love morel mushroom hunting. When morel season's here, I'll be in the woods for hours looking for morels, and it's an absolute blast. It doesn't stop you from connecting with nature, which, by the way, I think is a really good thing. I think people should go outside and connect with nature. I think it's a great thing to do. I just don't think you should be doing it in the context of shooting innocent animals. That's all.
Let's talk about your transition then. There is usually, when someone has this big paradigm shift like you have, there's like a moment where they start questioning their beliefs. When did the cracks in your hunting mindset start appearing? And talk us through that, and then talk us through the journey of what got you to actually start reconsidering your lifestyle.
Yeah, so it's hard to say exactly when, but if I had to guess, I'm guessing just some of the times I was first introduced to the word vegan, even though I
Mm,
thought it was completely stupid. I'm guessing that started, what do they call it? Like, dropping, I can't think of the right word, but maybe, just putting the thought in my head at least.
right.
My sister had a friend in high school who was vegan. Well, she wasn't actually vegan. She was just plant based. She would go plant based for a few months to help her acne, but still, she called herself vegan. I remember thinking that was like super dumb. And then in college, I heard like some people were against like hunting, which is why I wrote that paper. I thought that was incredibly stupid. I remember on Facebook, I would get fed posts, like vegan posts and anti-vegan posts. And whenever I'd see a vegan post, again, I'd think it was incredibly stupid. I'd comment on it and just, the typical meat eater shit, whatever, troll, like, bacon.
Right.
Um, but then one day, I don't know, it's kind of a boring story, not super interesting, but I was just, again, scrolling through Facebook, and I saw a vegan post. I was like, oh, I'm going to click on this, like, see these, like, stupid, like, blue hair, emotional vegans. You know how people think. That's how
Right.
I thought.
Yeah, yeah.
Getting owned in the comment section. Well, it wasn't that. It was one guy who was just factually and politely responding to everybody's, like, concerns and stuff. And he just answered everything really well. And at the end of the day, I realized all the meat eaters in the comment section had to say was bacon. And that wasn't good enough for me, because at the time I truly thought we had to eat meat to be healthy. And so reading this guy's comments, like him sharing studies of like how you can be perfectly healthy on a vegan diet and stuff, really got me to think like, shit, like if we don't need to eat animals, like how can we justify like forcing them into gas chambers and slicing their throats? Because I think most people agree, like if we were just forcing animals into gas chambers and slicing their throats open for no reason, like we were just doing it just to do it, I think almost everyone would agree that's bad. Just for most people, what justifies it for them is like, oh, well, we need to do it to be healthy, to have a thriving civilization, which is understandable. That's exactly what I thought. But the problem becomes when you realize you don't need to eat animals, and we don't need to do that to have a thriving civilization. I like to consider myself an honest person, so I looked into it myself after reading that comment section. And after looking into it myself, I only realized even more like, holy shit, like we can be perfectly healthy on a vegan diet. You know, you got the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the largest group of nutrition experts on the entire planet, saying a vegan diet's healthy at all stages of life. Well, who am I to know more than the largest group of nutrition experts on the planet? You got the vegetarian cohort, you got the Adventist Health Study 2, all this peer-reviewed research showing you can be perfectly healthy on a vegan diet. And then on top of that, you also start learning when you look into it, it's better for the environment. It's better for zoonotic disease. It's better for antibiotic resistance, all this stuff. So I'm like, man, like I no longer have the justification of necessity. And not only that, it seems we would thrive as a civilization even more if we weren't to eat animals. And yeah, that's when I stopped eating animals. I remember I was eating a double steak Subway sub, and I threw it away, and I stopped eating meat that day.
So when was it that you were doing all of this research, and when exactly did you change?
Yeah, so my freshman year of college would have been 2016. And then it was the very next year in 2017 that I started looking into it and I went vegan. So it's almost 2025. So 7 going on 8 years I've been vegan now.
And you've been all healthy, strong all the
yeah.
while?
I've been stronger than I ever have been before, like way stronger. Like I've literally put over 300 pounds on my squat, over 300 pounds on my deadlift, over 100 or 150 pounds on my bench. Like, yeah, I've just increased my strength and cardio and everything in every way since I've been vegan. Yeah.
Some hunters especially would argue that maybe they would agree with you. Actually, do you know what? Yeah, it's not necessary. You're right. Actually, we can be healthy. Fine. But they would argue that giving up hunting would make you lose the ability to be self-sufficient. They would say that that's why they hunt, because they want self-sufficiency. They don't want to let the government control their food supply. Or do you feel you've lost that ability or lost anything by stepping away from that yourself?
Absolutely not. There's nothing about stop. It's kind of funny because I kind of used a variation of this argument in my paper as well. But there's nothing that when you stop hunting that stops you. You can still own a gun. You can still go out and target practice. You can still grow your own gardens. You can still go on YouTube and look up survival techniques. You can still practice survival. You can still doomsday prep if you want. Like you can do all these things without hunting.
What about with your family? Because you've already mentioned a couple of times that it is a very hunting centric family. You've got the tattoo of the the shield, the coat of arms, which has deer on it. So I imagine you said everything's good now, but I imagine when you first transitioned, that must have been some challenges. I mean, how did your family and your friends and loved ones react, and how did you navigate all of that?
Yeah, so I remember the first time after I'd stopped eating meat already, I went to my grandma's and she made, I think it was like ribs or something, I don't know, some meat dish, and I didn't eat it. I remember she got very offended. All my family was very offended. My mom was mad. My mom took me aside and was like saying how I was like disrespecting my grandma. She was very scared for me. She thought, they all thought it was just a trend. She's like, this is, you're just, because at the time I was kind of into bodybuilding a little bit. She's like, this is just like another unhealthy diet. Like you need to eat meat, you need protein, you need nutrition from meat, all this stuff. So she was really worried. My dad actually, the hunter, like he actually didn't really care that much. He's the kind of guy who's like, live and let live. Like, if you're happy, I'm happy. Who cares? My friends and stuff, like, once I started posting about it on Facebook, because, you know, like, the new vegan, you're like really like, oh, like, I'm gonna share this truth with everyone, and everyone's just gonna agree with me and be like, oh wow, thanks, Hunter, I'm vegan now. Like, you legitimately think that in your head. It doesn't go like that. I essentially got my whole community to hate me. I lost a ton of friends over it. So yeah.
For the viewers who are not vegan, I'll just kind of explain what you just said. Like when we go vegan, a lot of people get very, very outspoken and not always necessarily in the most productive ways, right? But after some time, it's sometimes starts to kind of, you become more reasonable. You start to understand, okay, wait a minute, people need to come to the conclusions like I did, right? So it sometimes doesn't work. And people aren't the same as me. So you start to realize maybe I shouldn't have, shouted at that person or whatever. It's like, have you come to that conclusion? And if so, have you been able to bring some of those friendships back?
Yeah. So, my close friends, yeah, we're still close friends, but no, I legitimately like lost like friends over that. But no, like, yeah, I've become more, just realize, like, you know what, people, it's not what I do is, I have my own social media where I do vegan activism, my Instagram, my TikTok, and I'll post vegan stuff there all day. But on my like personal pages, like my personal Instagram or my personal Facebook where I just have friends and family, I don't post about that stuff anymore because it's not worth it. It's not worth losing friends. It's not worth losing family. It's not worth getting your whole community mad at you. It's not worth having your coworkers look at you as some vegan extremist weirdo. So now I have my activism pages. I have my time that I dedicate and go out and do activism. And that's when I talk about activism. In my personal life, when I'm just like hanging out with my personal friends and family or on my personal Facebook or Instagram, I don't really post about it. If somebody asks me about it, I'll absolutely talk about it.
It makes sense. The people that are least likely to listen to you and take you seriously on a new idea that challenges them are probably your friends and family, unfortunately. But if you are one of Hunter's friends, family who's not been able to talk to, I hope you're listening, because this is still really important. This is really important stuff. Okay, so I have someone on Twitter who asked a question. There's a guy called Dean Carson who I don't know if he's actually on your Twitter as well. Maybe he's popped up in your tweets before. He says this. So he's a hunter in New Zealand, by the way. And he says, there are no natural predators for introduced pest species in New Zealand. How would you recommend we control these animals without hunting?
Yeah, I have no idea. I'm not like a scientist. I'm not going to speak on a subject that I'm not like
we'll generalize it. Sorry, don't interrupt. We'll generalize it. So, like, what are your responses to hunters who are facing, who say that they have these practical challenges, not specifically New Zealand, but they use this. A lot of hunters will say, well, if we don't control X population of, whether it be deer or wild pigs, or then they'll overpopulate and it'll mess everything up. Like, what have you heard this, and how do you?
Yeah, I've heard it. So how I respond, humans are also very overpopulated. We would never see it as justified to go around hunting humans just because they're overpopulated. And by the way, humans are more overpopulated. Humans are way more damage the environment to a greater degree than any animal you could think of. We wouldn't see it as justified to go around hunting humans. So why would we see it as justified in the animal case? We can even think of dogs. I think there's like people will say, oh, I hunt deer because they're overpopulated. I think there's like 3 times more dogs in America than there is deer. I looked it up. They're more devastating to the environment because of like the food that we feed them and everything. We wouldn't see it as justified to go around and just shoot stray dogs, right? So I don't see why it would be justified in like the deer hunt in the deer case.
No, I've made the same point actually. I've made it about stray dogs and stray cats, for example, in places across Europe and also
cats. Sorry, but cats is a great one because cats are devastating to the environment. And any environment.
Yeah, no, they are. They're an unnatural predator. So they're the animals that are out in the wild. They haven't evolved to defend themselves against cats. So cats literally just, if they want to kill, they kill. There's literally no question they will kill.
They're like super effective hunters as well, and they repopulate at crazy degrees.
Yeah, no, that's true. And in a lot of countries in Europe, there are massive overpopulation of cats and dogs. But some governments have tried to propose that they would go out and cull them, and they've been met with fierce opposition. And a lot of countries have not done it for that reason, and rightly so. They shouldn't do it. So instead, they look to do, I don't know you call it castration, but neutering them, things, they're looking for different solutions that are non-lethal and that aren't harmful. And we would do that for cats and dogs. We would do that for humans. I agree with you. Why could we not look at that for these other animals as well, rather than just picking up a rifle and saying, well, this is what we have to do?
It makes no sense, right? So in the case of deer, we're like, oh yeah, we got to shoot them. There's no other option. But and then in the case of dogs and cats, who are more overpopulated and more environmentally damaging than say deer, all of a sudden there's fierce opposition. It makes no sense.
For sure.
And there's obviously other things you can do, like I'm sure there's certain things you can spray on, say like crops. Obviously we got pesticides and stuff, fences. It just makes no sense that in one case we're so heavily against it and with dogs and cats, but not with like deer and other animals.
Well, they had to do that in Australia, didn't they? They had a war against emus, didn't they? Did you hear about that? Was it ostriches or emus? I can't remember the difference between them. I think it was emus. But anyway, the big birds, and they were decimating the crops in Australia. This is a long time ago. So they sent in the army to kill them, but they outsmarted the army. They couldn't catch them. They couldn't kill them. And so the army had to retreat, and they lost the war. There was a literal war over with these birds, and they lost. And then in the end, they just had to build fences, which should have been what they did all along. They just built really good fences, and the birds couldn't get in to eat the crops anymore. And that was what solved it in the end.
That's hilarious. I didn't hear about that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, someone can quote me on that in the comments if I've got that wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it went. Anyways, so clearly, Hunter, from our conversation, it's clear that you respect animals as individuals. This is something you changed on, and you learned to respect animals as individuals and not as resources. That's a really tough message, especially for hunters. It's a tough message for a lot of people who eat animals and eat animal products, but especially a tough message for hunters. How do you balance sharing that message, that to respect animals as individuals, not as resources, with people who might feel attacked by that message?
Yeah, I just try to be as compassionate and understanding as I can. So like I said, like I don't go out of my way to talk about it in my personal life. Like I won't be the one to bring it up. Like if I see somebody eating meat, I'm not going to be like, hey, that was an innocent sentient being that had the preference to live, and you force them into a gas chamber so you could have trivial amounts of taste pleasure, right? Like I don't do that. I keep to myself. But if somebody sees me ordering vegan food and they ask, then I'll tell them about it. And I'm just really understanding about it. I'm like, if we don't need to do this to animals, like why are we, forcing them into gas chambers, bolt gunning them through the skull, slicing their throats open? You wouldn't do this to your dog, so why do you find it okay to do it to like a pig that are like just like your dog? They're just as emotional. Well, some studies show they're smarter than your dog. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I have 2 rescued pigs, by the way, and they're the sweetest creatures you could ever imagine. I love them to death, and just the thought of them going into a gas chamber just breaks my heart.
Especially when you personally know the animals, and some species of animals, like if you've personally spent time with a cow or a pig or a chicken, you do make that connection that they are individuals. You don't really fully grasp it until you actually sit with an animal and spend some real time with them, and then you're like, wow, that is really a person in there. That is mind-blowing. With chickens, I always just thought, chickens now. I would never hurt a chicken. They feel pain, but they're kind of just mindless, birds running around. I was so wrong. I spent 5 minutes with the chicken chilling, and I was like, wow, this chicken is there's an individual here. They have things they like, things they don't like. And then I met more chickens. Like, wow, these like and dislike different things. Some of them want to be picked up, some of them don't. Some of them want to eat out your hand. Some of them want it to be put in one specific place so they won't eat it. Like dogs.
They all have their own personalities, and they have their own like social hierarchy too. It's kind of crazy.
Chickens blow my mind because their brain is literally like, it's like that big. It is a pea. And they have emotions and a personality. Yep. What the hell? How do you fit that in the size of a brain that big? Why it's wild. And I understand why people would assume they don't have any of that, because their brains are so bloody small. I get it. I totally get it. I was there with you. But they really are like little individual.
They are. They have their own friends. Like they have like certain chickens that they prefer to hang out with over other chickens. Like it's crazy. I totally agree.
Yeah, they're awesome. Critics of veganism, which I'm sure you've dealt with a lot, both within your family and also in with your public activism, they often point to crop deaths and they talk about this as within plant-based agriculture, right? With the food we eat comes with a cost. It comes with crop deaths. They say that's a major ethical flaw of veganism. So if farming plants kills animals too, how do you deal with this, with what they say is an ethical flaw of your thinking that, well, your lifestyle is still responsible for these deaths?
Well, it takes more crops to feed animals due to the laws of thermodynamics. It's always going to take 10 times more energy to put into these animals than what we get out of them. So if you actually cared about this, you should be vegan. Like one study that I have saved to my phone shows it takes like 13 kilograms of crops to make just 1 kilogram of meat. So like if you actually do care about this, like you're contributing to this problem 13 times more.
How would you respond to a hunter who would criticize, would say your lifestyle is responsible for more death than theirs because of that point?
Yeah, so for one, that's an empirical claim, and I've still yet to see a single hunter justify that empirical claim. That is to actually show me data that my diet requires more death than hunting a single deer. We would never see crop deaths, though, as a justification to go around and shooting people through the heart. But we do see it as a justification to go around and shoot deer through the heart. Like you're saying on one hand, like, oh yeah, farmers protect and harvest their crops, so why can't I go and like animals die in the harvesting of crops, so why can't I like go and kill animals? But we would never use that in the human case. Like humans die in crop harvesting too. I literally had a farmer on my road that I went to church with growing up, who lived 2 minutes down the road from me. He got caught in an auger and got shredded alive. We would never say, oh, well, humans die in crop harvesting, so therefore it's okay to go around shooting humans through the heart. We would never use that logic. But
Right.
in the case of
farming
animals,
and killing them in slaughterhouses and or whatever, all the things that we do to animals for animal products, like we wouldn't use that same reasoning to do all of that to humans because some humans die in crop harvesting. It's a good point. You've also built a new identity that still embraces that strength and that ruggedness that, from this background that you come from and where you live. But now it's through powerlifting and jiu-jitsu, right?
yeah.
But now it's with compassion at its core of this is why you don't do this, do these shooting animals. Instead, you take on personal goals and you fight people who are willing to fight back, right?
Yeah.
So talk us through that then. How has this transformation influenced you in that way? Like what brought you to powerlifting, jiu-jitsu? Talk us through that and how you see yourself now.
Yeah, it's kind of important for me to break stereotypes because when I was young, I had the stereotype. I believed that all vegans were just like these blue hair, screechy, emotional people who were just illogical and emotional. And you can't build muscle on a vegan diet, and you can't be athletic on a vegan diet, and you need meat to be healthy. And that's just not true. And I wish I had somebody to look up to when I was that age that showed me that wasn't true. And I just want to break as many stereotypes as I can. So I got into powerlifting. I set a state record in the squat. Drug tested, everybody, you're vegan and strong, so you must be on steroids. It was in the drug tested division. And I also trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think self-defense is really important. I think, again, breaking stereotypes is important. A lot of people, when they find out I'm vegan, they like legitimately don't believe me. Like they think I'm fucking with them and they think I'm joking.
So with training jiu-jitsu, talk me through that then. When did you let your jiu-jitsu pals know that you were a vegan, and how did they react to it?
I never like told them like, hey, yeah, I'm vegan. Cause again, like I said, in my personal life, I don't bring it up unless somebody else does, but, they followed me on social media, and I think a few of my videos got recommended to them. So they figured it out. And, and they always joke like, oh, like, you got the meat sweats, like you're secretly eating meat behind this and all this shit. But no, they've become a lot more open to it. Like again, like they all still hunt and stuff, but they're like, yeah, like you're right, factory farming's messed up, and they ask me questions all the time, and they agree with me. They do. They're like, I see where you're coming from, all this stuff. So
your story is obviously one of it's a massive change, like very profound story that you've had, and profound paradigm shift, as we said earlier, that you've had, not just in kind of what you were doing, but like who you are as a person. So Here's a question. If you could go back and speak to your younger self, let's not say the 11-year-old self, but let's say the self where you were really into the hunting and you were, as you said, you thought vegans were insane and you were that living, breathing that life, in the woods with a rifle, what would you say to him?
Man, that's tough because my old self probably just would have told myself right now to fuck off. But I would just come from a place of understanding, like you remember when you first shot your first deer, how bad you felt. It's like your dad told you had to do this because it's a necessary evil. We have to eat to survive. Well, we do have to eat to survive, but we don't have to eat meat. We can be perfectly healthy off plants. You really don't have to do this. You don't have to end the life of this innocent sentient being. You don't have to shoot him through the heart, and you can just go home and eat some plant-based food instead. You wouldn't shoot a stray dog. You wouldn't shoot your dog. So why would you do it to this deer?
And you think your younger self would have responded in a bad way?
Yeah, I would have probably told myself right now to fuck off. But hey, it would have been dropping what do they say?
Planting a seed. Yeah.
Planting a seed. Yeah, planting a seed. Yeah.
Nice. Some people might argue that you've only changed because I don't know, some trend, some phase, right? That it's, I'm sure you've heard this from you heard it from your mum, right? Your grandma who was saying, so they thought it was a phase, a trend. So what do you say then to these people who are calling that out on you? They're saying, it's just trendy, veganism's cool and hip or whatever, and you just caught up in a trend.
Yeah, I have no choice but to laugh because I've significantly altered my life from the moment I decided to start caring about animal rights. I have literally lost friends. I have lost family. Coworkers, when they find out, they automatically see you as different or weird. They start looking at you differently. I wish I didn't have to speak up for animal rights. I wish I lived in a world where we weren't forcing innocent sentient beings into gas chambers. I would do anything for that. I actually, to be honest with you, I hate doing activism. I don't like it. I really don't. But I just feel like I have no choice. I have to speak up for these innocent individuals that can't speak up for themselves. They don't have a voice for themselves. So I fight for them. And if somebody wants to make that accusation, that's just not the truth. And if you want to say I'm lying, then I guess go ahead, say I'm lying, but I'm really not,
I don't think anyone.
There's no reason, especially where I'm from. It's not trendy. I'm literally the only vegan I know. My wife is vegan now. She wasn't vegan when she first met me. She didn't even know what veganism was. She had never heard of the word vegan. Mm-hmm. When people around here find out you're vegan, they literally think you're fucking weird. It's just quite the opposite, but
I don't think anyone could doubt your passion, and if they were, they're being dishonest. They could disagree with you, they could argue with you all day, but they can't. I don't think they can doubt your passion.
I've also gotten a bunch of animal rights tattoos. I got "Until Every Cage is Empty." I got an entire vegan back piece, so that would be quite a bit of dedication to just be faking it,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you'd be doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah.
So for people who are listening who are on the fence, could be a hunter, could be a meat eater, could be, well, when I say meat eater, I mean someone who's just literally just has never thought about, just eats the traditional, all the animal products in the diet. Or maybe they're just not sure at all about veganism. What's the one message you'd want them to take away from your personal journey?
Yeah, just look, if I can change, anybody can change. I was born in the most heavy meat eating, hunting, middle of nowhere, rural family you can imagine. Like I said, I don't know a single vegan in my real life. The only vegans I know are through the internet, talking to David right now. Again, aside from my wife who went vegan once she met me. If I can change, anybody can change. You don't have to be scared about not getting enough protein, not getting the right nutrition. Just eat enough food, eat a multivitamin. You will be perfectly healthy. You might even be healthier.
Hunter, it's been incredible to interview you today. Your story was honestly super inspirational, an amazing story. And it gives hope that if someone like you, who you were, can realize that animals are individuals and, realize all of this injustice and make the changes necessary, I think we have hope for the rest of the world. So I really do appreciate you coming on and talking us through this.
Absolutely, David. I really appreciate you having me on, man. Anytime. Love talking to you, dude.
And if you want to help me with my vegan and animal rights work, check out the David Rams Patreon and YouTube teams in the description.